I have been to Canada 96 times in support of tech and tech companies over the last 20 years, several hundred presentations to tech groups. And so not only have I been there 96 times, I've been there on vacation as well. So I've been skiing in Banff. My late wife passed 8 years ago. I got remarried 6 years ago, and we spent our honeymoon in Montreal. And then way back when I was 18, a midshipman on a Navy cruise, we stopped in Montreal, and actually got my first girlfriend. I still remember her name, Roland Beauchou. So based on all that background, I'm pretty much half Canadian, don't you think? All right, maybe quarter Canadian. How about an honorary Canadian? So what I'm going to show you is not our opinion, our group, but it's an integration of about 300 surveys that have come out in the last 15 months by big prestigious organizations, McKinsey, Forrester, Gartner, where they're interviewing buyers, salespeople, sales managers, CEOs. So our job has been, as an advisor to some of our larger clients, advise them on what's going on and what they may need to do next. And every slide I'm going to show will have the references on where we got that information. And this is an overview of one of my 4 Vistage presentations. So you can tell I've got a submarine background. So anytime you watch a submarine movie and the submarine gets ready to submerge, big down angles coming. So they sound the diving alarm. Sounds like this, ooga, ooga. Just warning everybody, hold on. Secure equipment. Don't let things slide off of horizontal surfaces and hurt people. So it may come as no surprise that I have an authentic from a salvage yard, nuclear submarine, diving alarm right here in my office. So to make this a nice quiet meeting, let's submerge the meeting. Everybody ready? Here we go. All right, we're ready to roll, nice and quiet. So one of the things I wanted to look at first is McKinsey's done a look back at the last 3 recessions, and the same consistent lessons are learned in all of them. So first, cut out the fat. You don't know what's going to happen. So decrease spending everywhere except in sales and marketing, and increase that for obvious reasons. It's a great time to upgrade company processes. It's another great time also to sharpen the saw for all associates, especially for salespeople for obvious reasons. It's also a great time to hire talented submarine salespeople who would normally not be available because they're doing well and making a nice income. Maybe they have an equity play. But in this pandemic, like previous recessions, many of them get furloughed. So it's a great time to find them. It's also a great time to consider M&A. 2 recessions ago, one of our bigger companies, a Vistage company in Tampa, during that recession, bought 6 smaller mechanical contractors, came out of the recession twice as big, twice as strong, 3 times the footprint. And then maybe the best and most important lesson learned in recessions is rapidly innovate new offerings, new products, new services, new processes. And when McKinsey does this look back between the last 3 recessions, the companies that rapidly innovated grew at 16% per year until the start of the next recession, usually a decade. And the ones that did not innovate only grew at 4%. If you compound those both out for a decade, the difference in revenue is amazing. So this is one of the most important lessons learned in recessions, this pandemic. Rapidly innovate, and it's not too late to innovate new stuff. Now, let's see what the buyers are telling us. So the buyers that 100% of them have been using, 100% more of them have been using digital solutions, vendor apps, self-service portals. And the return on investment for vendors and suppliers that develop these apps is very high because there's no salespeople involved. And buyers have been buying big online. And you can see here, 10% of the buyers will buy over $1 million a year. I mean, $1 million in any transaction, typically products. And here are the current B2B interactions between buyers and sellers. You can see it's still a third of them are digital. And when you survey the buyers, 80% of them saying, I like this flexibility, the so-called omni-channel approach. I can buy in many different ways. Now, some of the things that buyers have been telling us, because of a lack of face-to-face, the second best thing for a buyer to trust a new company or a new salesperson is a strong referral. And we all know referrals have always been important. They've been extra important in this recession. 75% of the buyers believe that the virtual meeting, like this on a Zoom meeting or Remo, is more effective than a face-to-face meeting. And 4 out of 5 buyers prefer a virtual meeting to a phone call with a salesperson. So you might wonder, I wonder if there's a difference in closing rate between buyer and seller being on a Zoom call or Teams call and being on a phone call. Well, it's just a small difference. I've got 7 salespeople. If you ask them, they'll say that's low. They'll say we don't do any phone calls. We haven't done phone calls for 6 months. It's all typically Zoom meetings. And when you ask the buyers, okay, is this a transitory thing? They all say no. We like this digital transformation. Now, some of the engagement, again, they love this referral. And they like the fact that after this last recession, the Challenger sale book came out. They like the fact that salespeople who are trained on this now understand how to politely challenge buyers to think differently. Think about the change journey to their company. 3 out of 4 buyers really don't want to interact with a salesperson in person in the future. They see no need. And even more surprising, right now, 60% of the millennials are buyers, or 60% of the buyers are millennials or younger. And 50% of them don't care if they ever interact with a salesperson by any means, ever. I was just doing one of these presentations with a group in Toronto, and one of the CEOs said, my wife's a buyer. She never interacts with salespeople. She only buys stuff online. One of my sons is 38. He's a Navy civilian buyer for the government. He's progressed pretty well in GS-15, being a fairly powerful position for buying. He never talks to a salesperson and actually doesn't want to either. So now when you ask the buyers what's the future hold, many of them want salespeople who have deep insights into their business. And they get real frustrated with salespeople who don't know what the buyer knows they should know. Now, this all kind of started 3 or 4 years ago when the Harvard Business Review came out with a article, provocative title, and that was Solution Selling is Dead. Solution selling is dead. Now, a little history. 20 years ago, salespeople were starting with buyers with a presentation. Then a book came out called Solution Selling. And around the same time frame, another one, Consultative Selling. And both of them say the same thing. Don't start with a presentation. Do a 3-step process. Build rapport, do a needs analysis or discovery process, and then offer a solution selling, that fits. The trouble with that, and the reason for the article, Solution Selling is Dead, is now today, most buyers are way down the road in their purchasing process before they interact with their short list of potential vendors. And many of the buyers get frustrated when salespeople don't know, haven't done the research, and they get very frustrated with the buyers, the salespeople that haven't done this. And that's essentially why solution selling is dead. The buyers expect us to know now. Also, buyers get frustrated with salespeople, the 80% that aren't very good, who aren't very good at giving demos. And by a demo, I mean they get frustrated because the salespeople don't have the product knowledge. They try to sell too much instead of being transparent and educating the buyer. They may have been trained and heard that they should get the buyer to say yes a few times, and they totally overuse that technique. So now in this pandemic, buyers really would love to have an automated demo, or at least a choice of an automated demo, a demo with a salesperson, or maybe both together. And since in their personal lives, they're getting ready to all really liking all these new technologies, virtual reality and augmented reality, then they really want that in our demos as well. Take augmented reality. Most women, including my wife, don't want to buy clothes online. For example, my wife's a size 4 for most manufacturers, but there's a couple she's a size 6. So she really doesn't want to buy clothes online unless it's just a hoodie or a ball cap, something simple. Now with augmented reality, she can go to her website, try on a blouse or a skirt. I can go try on a pair of trousers, whatever it is. And if you're willing to give up your measurements and send in your picture, then you can see how the clothes fit from every angle. So the buyers are expecting these newer technologies in your demo. And therefore, you can tell already now, when buyers get to your website, they want a great digital experience. That's what they're expecting. Now, there are 3 or 4 new techniques for salespeople that have emerged in this pandemic. There's always been 4 ways it took a buyer to trust a salesperson. 1, they had to be likable. Nobody wants to do business with a jerk or people they don't like. So this feeling of rapport and likability is important. We want to deal with honest salespeople with a high degree of integrity. All those personal characteristics are good, but they also have to know something. They have to have strong product knowledge. So this has always been these 4 elements, the foundations of trusting a salesperson. Now, after this pandemic's almost over, there's 2 new elements that the buyers want to see. Number 1, the use of LinkedIn has exploded in this pandemic. 80% of the B2B leads that have emerged from LinkedIn. Now 750 million people on LinkedIn. And so when a salesperson reaches out to a prospect and asks them to connect, we all know what's going to happen next. The prospect will look at the salesperson's profile. And if it isn't complete, or it's all about them getting a new sales job, then they're not going to connect. So having a complete LinkedIn profile is another element of trust. And the 6th one is this. If a salesperson can't get a Zoom or a Teams call organized, can't get the time zone right, can't pull up a document once they're like a proposal, once they're on the meeting with the buyer, can't modify the proposal in real time, don't have guidance from the company on how much they can modify it, can't get the buyer to sign with DocuSign or some other electronic signature, for most savvy buyers, they're out. So there are now 6 elements for trusting a salesperson. Also, since many of the buyers' problems are different and the problems of their customers are different, they want salespeople who are creative, problem solver sorts of salespeople who can think outside the box. And they also want the salespeople to put the buyer first as opposed to their quota. And when you think about a salesperson who has this new mindset, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not my quota doesn't matter. I'm a problem solver. My main metric is how many problems have I solved? And actually, when the salespeople have that new mindset now, buyers can sense it. Now, as I mentioned, the buyers expect us to know a lot. So now the great salespeople, based on this pandemic experience, are fanatical researchers, fanatical. And so the buyers expect them not just to research their company, but know about their competition, understand how they're positioned with respect to their competition, and as appropriate, be ready with some ideas on how to help them. And it usually takes having a service like Dun & Bradstreet. They also fanatically research buyers with LinkedIn, Sales Navigator. So they've got information for rapport building. And they'll also find out the buyer's personality style before they'll reach out. Now, if you go back to the Harvard research on salespeople, there's 25 million in the US, 2 million in Canada. An 80-20 rule applies to both, meaning 20% say US, 5 million are elite, top of the game. 80%, 20 million, aren't so hot. And their turnover rate every year is about 30% per year. One of the reasons they're not very good is this. They're pretty good at selling to buyers who have exactly the same personality style they do, because what they'd like to give to the buyer is just what the buyer would like to receive. And they're not worth a damn selling to the other 3 personality styles. So before they reach out by any means, they're going to go to Crystal Nose and find out which of these four personality styles the buyer is. So let's take a couple of examples. Let's say the driver buyer, the one in the red, the task-oriented, big picture buyer, and you're the thinker salesperson, and you try to overwhelm that driver buyer with lots of data. How are we doing so far? Driver buyers want salespeople to be 3 things: be brief, be concise, and be gone. How about if you're in the green box, you're the big talking communicator, and you're in selling to the driver, and the big talking communicator can't shut up. What is the driver buyer thinking to themselves fairly quickly? Shut up. Where are we going with this? So whether you're going to be on a Zoom call, in person, on the phone, knowing the buyer's personality style and knowing what to give that buyer is one of the top skills of the elite salespeople. Not so much with the average salespeople. They just haven't had the training to do it. And then fourth, as I mentioned, buyers get very frustrated with salespeople who don't know what the buyer knows they should know if they don't research properly. So we got to develop a deep understanding of what the buyer's needs are. And we can get it from these various sources in addition to the research we've already done. Now, the Harvard Sales Department, 42 years, lots of great data every year. Last 10 years, the Harvard Neuroscience Lab have been communicating last 5 years. Great sales training today, including ours, is based on all these neuroscience principles. So if one of these elite salespeople who's done great research and understands pretty much what the buyer wants, after rapport building, we'll start with a statement like this. Here's our understanding of your needs. Bullet, bullet, bullet. And then ask a fairly easy question like this. Do I have this about right? So based on the research at Harvard, with the Neuro Lab and the sales department talking to each other, you don't have to, as a salesperson, you don't have to have this exactly right. You just have to have it about right. And then, based on their research, 95% of the cases, it causes a big conversation between the buyer and the seller. And after that conversation gets going, it naturally morphs into the discovery process. And as opposed to being frustrated, the buyer is very impressed. One more new technique for salespeople, it actually isn't new, it's just come up so much in this pandemic. So when the buyer said, great, send me a proposal, here's the worst possible thing a salesperson can do. And that is email the proposal and hope to hear back from the buyer. The reason this is not a good idea, most of you I'm sure know, is that who knows what the buyer's going to do with it. They might put it in a folder. They might send it out to 2 other people in the company and try to get their input. They're slammed and they never get back. The buyer might take a quick look and go, oh, this just isn't right. So a much better idea, once you have the proposal ready, it used to be we could go over it with their company and go over it with them. So a much better idea now would be to schedule another Zoom meeting by sending an email that looks like this. This works in the US. I don't have Canada data, but I'm sure it's similar. It works 2/3 of the time. Now, there are some cases where it won't work. Fortune 500 company, big box retailer, municipality, government. But at least in those cases, the salesperson can get together with the buyer on a Zoom call and go over the proposal before they email it in to cyberspace. So there's a few new techniques for salespeople. Now, when you survey most of the sales managers, they're saying the new role for salespeople is going to be the hybrid role. In other words, they have to be left-handed and right-handed because they'll be interacting with buyers by all of these media. And one interesting part, text messages have really come on strong in this pandemic. And when I was in China, I've been to China many, many times since 1979. I know it sounds crazy. So I'm in a meeting with the deputy mayor of Beijing and my GM in China, Simon Guo. And her responsibility was to get the state-owned organizations to be able to sell like the rest of us so they become profitable. So we were trying to sell our sales training. So we're chatting. I mean, I'm listening. They're talking to Mandarin. And my guy's cell phone rings. He answers it, has a little discussion, and then goes back to the conversation. The deputy mayor of Beijing, when Simon answered the phone, just leaned back and smiled. And then when Simon was done with the phone call, they continued the discussion. I almost fell out of my chair when that happened, but that's just the way it is in China. There's no voicemail. That's why business goes at the speed of no voicemail. There isn't any voicemail to look at later. And it's really come on strong in this pandemic. And fewer of the interactions will be in person. So if we're going to take a look at hiring a new salesperson, here's what we want. There won't be as many, so high aptitude. As the world goes more technical, we need more subject matter experts, and therefore you have to have at least a moderate IQ. You want to have a high degree of emotional intelligence, tireless work ethic. And then there's 3 new ones that have come up, characteristics. Since there'll be less salespeople, then you want them to have the ability to sell at the C level. Since there won't be as much face-to-face, how they write an email or write a proposal or send an in-mail becomes important. So you want to be able to write well, and you want to have these new neuroscience-based selling skills. And a whole sales strategy transformation is needed for our companies, an overarching digital strategy. So the Harvard Business Review tells us coming into the pandemic, 1/3 of the companies selling B2B and B2G had a written down digital strategy. Coming out, 2/3 will need one. We may think we're that other 1/3 that doesn't need one. The potential, though, is if we don't get one and our competitors get one, now we're in the catch-up mode. And this is just out of the box from McKinsey, projected that 60% of the future productivity potential for all of our companies, 60% will be digital opportunities. And so a real transformation in a sales strategy is needed in these 4 areas. And it's pretty obvious to most of us that we're going to be spending more money on technology. Good or bad, depends on your perspective. One nice thing is, since many of the salespeople will be virtual, there are ways to get some of that money back. In this pandemic, half the companies have been doing well, half not. 90% of the companies selling the subscription model have been flat or growing, totally revalidating how they're valued, 5 times a regular company. And Robbie Baxter, the queen of the subscription model, has written a new book called The Forever Transaction. She claims EAAS, everything can be sold as a service, and her new book is essentially the Bible on how to do it. Some of the sales trends have really accelerated during this pandemic. So the number of salespeople is going down for sure. The hybrid salespeople will dominate. Again, as the world goes more technical, the SMEs will continue to shine. And it's pretty obvious that field sales, a lot of it, I've heard 60, 70%, will shift to some combination of inside sales, customer service, or digital self-service solutions. A whole new marketing strategy transformation is needed. So again, as we've talked about, the solution selling is dead idea. So buyers are obviously researching before they reach out to us. Therefore, they expect robust information on our websites, actually enough so that they could qualify themselves and also understand their change journey from their current vendor to us. And I think most of us have seen this. Most buyers have completed pre-pandemic 70% all of the way through their buying process before they contacted their short list. Now it's 90%. So it's even gotten worse for salespeople. And in many cases, good news for salespeople, marketing has been taking over the first third of the sales process, meaning getting qualified leads and sending them to salespeople. And then the emerging reality from the Forrester Future of Sales 2025 study, most digital interactions between our company and the prospect will be digital, and probably the first one will be digital. Now, I've given this presentation, the longer version, to 168 groups, Vistage and Tech Canada. Here's some of the interesting feedback from some of the CEOs. Notice this last line. This is the CEO talking. I now feel more balanced, healthier, and happier. Here is a very interesting perspective by one of the CEOs. So, in other words, the buyers will say they like the virtual better, but will they actually be able to execute it, or do they have to actually take face-to-face meetings to justify their role? And here's a Vistage company in the Bay Area. And if you wonder if this CEO is going back to normal, he ain't going back. So these I've got all kinds of information from feedback from CEOs. This is just a sampling that's interesting to look at. And so now the question for all of us, including our company, is what will be your post-pandemic normal? I'll give you our case study to illustrate that. All of you have a case study that's essentially this. So we've always done 90% of our sales training in person, 10% online. And I'm in a Vistage group with most of the other CEOs of sales training companies. We collaborate sometimes, compete sometimes, refer each other sometimes, have dinner together at trade shows, and all in this group together. If you'd asked us pre-pandemic, which is more effective, in-person sales training or online, the vote would have been 17 to zip. In-person is better. Now, all of us have been only doing online for 15 months. And here's the feedback we're all getting, not just us, from the salespeople, sales managers who go through it. So now here's the question for us. Do we go back to 90% in person? We don't think so. So what do? Here's our current thinking. We're getting feedback from our customers, but here's our current thinking. For the larger companies, keep on doing sales training for them in person. For the 100 public sales training sessions we do around the North America every year, only do in person in the larger cities, Toronto, New York, Houston, Chicago, LA, and all the smaller cities do them online. We don't know that's the right answer, but that's where we're leaning. So all of us, all companies, have some version of what's our new normal after the pandemic is over. So now we're almost done. 2 slides to go. Here are 10, based on everything we've learned, here are 10 potential action items for all of you. It might be something worth discussing in your networking. So when you get networking, this slide will go away, but I sent Allison a 2 or 3 page, I think it's a 2-page handout that has this in it. So when you're doing networking, you want to look at it, you can look at your handbook. So last slide, I've got 3 things that are complimentary I'd like to offer anybody who would like it: a copy of this slide deck, or even a copy of the larger slide deck, an electronic copy of our latest book, The Neuroscience of Selling, and a 30-minute complimentary sales chat about problems or aspirations.